we're just gonna roll with it. Okay, hello, welcome to this week's episode. You'll notice that things are a little bit cleaner and that a lot has happened last week. Last week was spring break for me and I spent a exorbitant amount of time on this project. So let's dive right in. This is what our project looks like as of last week. You'll notice that it doesn't look too much different from last week because, nothing has really changed. So we still got our settings page. The only thing is the profile didn't load properly, which we don't have to worry about that. You see we got our footer, header, everything looks kind of nice. And you'll notice that, we got this fancy CSS thing. Each of these have their own applications and stuff. And so last week we kind of decided on this new direction for the project. And that's gonna be, these two projects are basically gonna be combined together. And I kind of was made some really big decisions on what I want to see out of this project. So taking that, I went in with that mindset this week and I was like, okay, I need to clean up this project. So there's a lot of excess crap and I want to get as lean as I can before getting started. So you'll notice this CSS, there's all of these guys, delete some of this stuff. So you can see there's just a lot of stuff here right now, which is, it's what I was wanting it to look like in the future. But I think now we are going to be getting rid of a lot of that stuff. So you can see here, this is this last week, just commits from last week. And I went through and deleted a ton of stuff. I've never deleted this much code just because I could. So I ended up going through, one of the first changes that I made was to the CSS file. The CSS file was kind of scaring me a bit because it was 1,400 lines. I think it was more than 1,400 lines. And it was just one single file. So I could to figure out where anything was, I'd have to dig through this file to find stuff. So one of the first things I did, chunk that out. You can see I've got everything kind of went into its own CSS file that's only a few hundred lines or maybe 200 lines or so. So everything kind of got chunked out. That made it just a whole bunch easier to just be able to read it. And then I went through and deleted so much stuff. Deleted the header, deleted the footer, decided that I'm gonna end up using a sidebar, which we'll talk about more in a second. Ended up deleting to-do runner, goal bar, all of that stuff I got rid of because I basically decided that I was just not gonna use it anymore. So I was like, you know what, I might as well get this stuff out of the way and start working with something that we're actually going to be using. So I did end up keeping the mobile navigation because I know that was something I really still wanted to use and I spent a lot of time on. I know all of this stuff is saved in Git. So let me see here. I'm gonna check out our most recent. 8. The Grand Refactor. Let's see. There we go. And then we're gonna just start this project up again. So you'll see here, this is what the new project look like once this thing opens properly. Doing this all live because I love doing things live. All right, let's see here. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay, so you'll notice right off the bat, our home page is now just a single thing that says home. And that's because I got rid of all of the app card and the hovering effect thing. All of that was excess bloat CSS, and all three of those pages, I did keep up the Pomodoro page. We'll talk more about that in a second. So we got rid of two of those pages though, the to-do runner and the goal bar. Got rid of the CSS for it, got rid of the JavaScript for it, got rid of all the backend stuff that wasn't hooked up, and that's why they were kind of placeholders. So you can see all of that stuff is gone. That was a big part of those 3,000 lines of code that were deleted. The header and footer were deleted because I realized everything can fit on this nice sidebar, and I realized, and you'll see in a second here in the project design, that a lot of what I wanted to do, I realized that everything that I use regularly uses a sidebar, and I really like the design. So this is how this design bar looks right now. I'm thinking I might change this blue. I might change it to white. Not exactly sure. So we can go over here. You can see, look, our Pomodoro bar is still here with our sessions. So you can see it just loaded in the sessions, and we can still create sessions and delete them. So that functionality is still there because we're going to still be using that. Go down here. You can see profile page still hasn't been changed. The font has been updated because I don't know why I wasn't updating properly before. We still have application hotkeys. This hotkey's been deleted. This is mostly as a placeholder to figure out what I'm going to do with settings. I am going to be using settings. It's just going to be figuring out how I'm going to be using it. Also, logging out now is very simple. Another thing I did change is that if you somehow access a page that you shouldn't access because you're not logged in, then you'll see on the sidebar these options here. So that is nice. All of this stuff hasn't really been changed too much. There was no reason to change it. So now that's pretty much, you can see, is so much more leaner of an application now. So that is what we look at right now. That is what literally just this all happened this past week, was deleting all those lines of code and all that sort of stuff. So now move off our thing and we'll talk about project design, because I did talk a little bit about this last week, and I decided a 180 from a previous decision that I made, that I'm actually going to be implementing projects and that they are actually vital to the design. If you want to hear that conversation, that's the last episode. But I went through this week and I was like, you know what? Maybe I will start with the projects and I will get some progress done in that. So I created a user story, went a little bit more in depth on the different things that I wanted to be able to do with it. I decided that I only really, for starting, is going to be using a color, name, and dollars per hour or hourly wage or whatever you want to call it. Being able to view the projects, edit all of those properties, delete the projects, each project should have its own page, and it should open up in its own page, receiving a prompt to confirming to delete things. So these are the kind of the things that I wanted to be able to do with projects. Now, projects have not been implemented this past week, but I did spend a lot of time wireframing and thinking out how I want to visualize projects. And all of these things have kind of been going in parallel, so you kind of just see common threads. Like, I started off as like, okay, the simplest solution would be just forms. Just a form for color, form for title, form for the hourly wage, and just a button that says create. And then a little thing, like just a simple table that is edit. I kind of went with that idea a little bit. I kind of moved things out a little bit more. I was like, started messing with this idea of a sidebar, what they would look like in a list if you just were to edit it and delete it directly from like a little editable menu. What it would look as a tab down with like different tasks you could see in there, because there is an app that I use that does that. Having a project management page. This is based off another design. You'll see this later. Archiving projects, interesting idea. Don't think I need it right away. I think you can just delete it. It's another app, and they have a big filter system. I don't think right away I'm going to use a filter system, but these are just some of the different ideas. One of them was interesting. When you press the add button on the projects, it creates a new modal window, and then you can go from there, fill out the information. So instead of having its own page, being able to edit it directly from the side window. I like this design. This design is probably the one that I'm going to use next week. Something similar to this. I think this is my last one, but having something so you can see back here, the back will kind of be blurred out as this new project comes up. So it won't necessarily be its own. It'll have to be its own page, I guess. I'm still thinking through how to do that, because technically it doesn't need to be its own page. So these are just kind of some of the designs, working through a little bit more what it might look like on mobile to add a new project, to manage projects. So here's our mobile nav here. So projects might be something to manage there. So that's kind of it for project design. I did spend some time making some wireframes, thinking through some positions, and that kind of led me to, okay, I wanted to research the UI and layout of other applications that I use regularly, because now I'm thinking, like, most of these designs, I kind of got fixated a little bit on this idea of a sidebar. Like, maybe instead of projects being their own table and their own page, maybe projects should just be on the sidebar. So I started going through on our second thing here, designing and doing some research on color theory, a little bit of design principles. I kind of realized that there's this common dark mode aesthetic that I really like, dark mode aesthetic minimalist, that I love it. And I use like all sorts of applications that use it. I end up spending most of my time with applications on this because I can end up leaving them open on the side and not have to think about it. So this is VS Code. This is the code editor that I love to use. So I kind of broke out the modules, looked at their different colors, what they use for primary colors, secondary colors. I really love the thin line that they use. Like you can see, it's a little bit hard to see, but thin lines, symbols, icons. I really love that stuff. This is Discord. Similar thing. Each day has this very thin line. You've got all these different tooltips I think were pretty interesting. And then you also have for their sidebar. This is the biggest thing I was looking at was sidebar. How do people make this? And the pattern that I found the most was you have this list of whatever it is. They might have icons next to it, name. You have a hover, which is this color right here. I think it's this one right here is your hover color, then a selected color, and then everything else has a base color. Discord has the same setup. This is the hover color. This is the selected color. You can notice like literally like they look so similar when they're separated out like this, but they are subtle enough difference. Same thing, this is Habitify. This is a similar application that I use. Also has, they use a primary color for their selected and current pages. I don't know what I think about that. Thinking a little bit about whether or not I want that. But down here, this is how you create a new area of projects. You literally just press this button, the text field shows up here, and then you can go from this, it will just create a new one, and then you can edit, rename, and delete it, and it will open up its new page. So I like that. That's actually really cool. I might end up using that. But you can see a lot of these designs are literally just primary color, background, secondary, and tertiary color. This is Todoist. This is a really well-known to-do management application. I've gotten a lot of interesting design principles because, again, it follows my favorite type of aesthetic of like these types of colors with a single primary color. And what I love is, and it's a little bit difficult to see down here, I didn't really want to I don't want to copy these ideas. I just want to like take inspiration from them. Whenever you hover, they use their primary color. And then whenever you can actually, so there's two different things. It's like whenever you can't interact with something or you're not like above something, it's this like gray color. So it kind of, you don't focus on it visually. But then when you hover over it and when you can interact with it, it becomes this bright color and you can see it out of everything else. So that's something that I really want to take inspiration from because a lot of applications use that. So you can see down here, once you hover over the add section, it turns a different color. Once you press that, it opens up this text box with a confirm and cancel. You can't create a task without a name. So the button doesn't change colors until you put in text. So I really like that. So now let's go look at the sidebar. So now we're gonna take another look at the sidebar. This guy from the inspiration, now looking at the design. So you can see I'm actually using a very, very similar, if not, I think it might be the exact same color scheme as, I wanna say VS Code is the color scheme that I used for this, but I'm not sure. So you can see hovers. So our menu, different color from our background. There's a hover color. Let me see, there we go. Hover color, when I enter in here, our text color is kind of faded out, but once I press on it, you can see the primary line is an idea I got from, I wanna say VS Code or Habitify, using this like selector here, and then also the color turns white. I might actually have the icon turn white too, but it was kind of fun to have the same branding colors as ToDoBox. So, and you can see even on here, like, you know, we use this, I mean, this is just kind of, I had some fun with that. So I really like this design. This is probably one of my favorite things that I've built this past week. And I want to take this and apply it to everything now. And I also want to improve it a bit. So that is that. That's pretty much all of the work stuff in terms of progress was the sidebar. So let me get rid of this and then we'll talk about courses. So last week I said I was working through these courses. This is the progress that I had last week. And then this week, I did 25% of this web design course, and then about 10%, I think closer to 12% of this guy. So I'm still on track to finish these courses by the end of the month. This one is gonna be really useful for selecting elements, like all the animations for the UI. This is gonna be really helpful for that stuff. This one has been really interesting. So far, it's been a little bit bland, I'm gonna be honest, because a lot of it is repetitive information that I've heard in a different course. So, you know, if you're watching it for the first time, it's got a lot of great tips, but I find that going through multiple courses ends up giving me the most coverage of information. So this one I'm learning about Figma, specifically that tool, how to create prototypes. So yeah, that's pretty much all I did this past week. So you can see designs, working through projects, the big refactoring, deleting nearly 4,000 lines of code. So now that we're thinner, I'll go through here again. So now next week, and this is going to be, I'm not gonna have nearly as much time next week. This past week was spring break, so I had like all this time to work on this stuff. So next week, I'm thinking I might actually clean up the Pomodoro timer. I think we don't necessarily need it right now in its current state, and it's going to be changed visually. So I might as well just delete that code, get that out of there, free me up some more space. That shouldn't take too long. I want to start implementing the project. Now that I've got the design for the project, I want to be able to implement it. And actually, so the other thing, which I didn't mention in project design, which I wanted to, is that I actually created a model for projects, and I actually am able to create with our API right now projects. So I said I wasn't going to work on it until next week, but I did get the back end part of the database connections working for projects. So we can create projects, we can edit them a little bit. So that has been done already. So that's already working for the next step, which is going to be the visual button pressing, API calls, and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully next week we will have projects. I'm going to clean up the rest of the CSS and Pug templates. I went through, let's see here, we'll open this guy up again. So one of the things here with the sidebar is that I went through and started learning the BEM, it's like kind of like a principle or methodology of creating CSS and HTML templates. It's the base, the element, and then the modifiers. So it cleans it up a lot, and I love it so much now. So I want to start using that for everything. So I'm going to be looking for ways to incorporate that going forward. So let's keep going here. So cleaning up the rest of the Pug and CSS, I want to make sure that everything follows the BEM standard. I want to also use Jess and work with creating tests for the project so that when I change something, I can see whether or not my tests are passing, which is just going to help me be able to change more things, get rid of and work on that faster next week. So I don't know if I'm going to work on that right away. I think that maybe I'll work on it with projects. Maybe projects will be the first thing that I implement that uses tests, just so that I can make sure that all the API stuff works properly. And then I also might create some prototypes and wireframes in Figma just for new features for micro interactions and broader scale wireframe stuff. So that, I think right now I've just been using like paper, as you've been seeing. Might start moving into Figma and start doing that stuff. I also think that I'm going to start measuring velocity because I have not been doing that. And part of the reason why is because this past week I literally spent maybe 15 to 20 hours on things related to this. I mean, each of the courses were about 2 hours a day. And then I spent about an hour and a half every morning working on the grand refactor, the CSS, the project models, the design work. So I spent a lot of time this past week, and I don't think that pace I'm going to be able to keep up. So now going forward, I'm going to start measuring how much I'm able to do in the free time that I have each week and start mapping that out and seeing like, okay, this past week I got 2 story points worth of stuff done, and next week I should try to plan for that. So I'm really hoping that that's where we'll end up next week. I'm really looking forward to this. This is like by far the most progress that I've made in a single week working on a project like this. So really big stuff here. Really looking forward to how it's going to look in the future. And we might actually have like some stuff that we can play with in like a week or two now. I thought that like most of the stuff when I started this week, I literally started looking and I was like, gosh, this thing is so bogged down with all this excess crap that I don't know if I'm going to be able to create anything. So I like got rid of as much of it as I could, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple weeks. So yeah, that is what I've been working on. This is this past week and going into next week. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.